My sheet trays for a drum cookie, you can either use a piece of wax paper, you can use a piece of foil. One of the key components is making sure that you grease the sheet tray lightly so that they don't stick. I've got a lot of my ingredients are on my speed rack behind. Okay, so we're just gonna go through a quick snickerdoodle recipe. We're gonna do this by hand so that you don't feel like if you don't have a mixing machine that you're not gonna be able to do this, all right? We're gonna do this the old-fashioned way with a wooden spoon. One of the key things is to make sure your butter is soft. If your butter isn't soft, it's gonna be really hard to work with. So I've had this butter out since 8 o'clock this morning. It's super soft. I'm gonna add this to my large bowl. All right, I always work with larger bowls because I don't like to make a mess. If you try to use a small bowl, things tend to fly all over the place, all right? I need a cup of sugar for this, so I'm using my dry cup measure. Make sure that all the angles are covered here. So I'm using my dry cup measure. I've got my granulated sugar in my big bag. I also have a spatula, but you can use a knife. And I want to make sure I level my ingredients. So I take a big heaping cup of it, and then I'm just going to drag it back and level it off. This is going to go into my bowl. And then with a wooden spoon, I'm just going to start mashing the butter and blending it in with the sugar. This is what's considered the creaming method. So even though I'm not creating a lot of friction, I'm just trying to blend it. And this has been out for about 3 hours, and the butter is still kind of tough to work with. You just got to be patient when you work this. All right, break it up with your spoon, mash it, the back of the spoon, and then invert it. I'm jumping ahead because I didn't measure all my other ingredients. All right, kind of just want to get this thing settled in. All right, and a lot of recipes will tell you blend until light and fluffy. All right, and you're looking for one solid product. It's hard to get it light and fluffy if you don't incorporate enough friction or air. So once it's blended, now I can start mixing it until it forms into a solid mass, which it has done. All right, so this is the equivalent of using your electric mixing bowl and the paddle attachment. I've just done that with my wooden spoon, okay? I'm just gonna put that aside for now, and then I'm just gonna measure the rest of my ingredients. So you should have all your mise en place ready to go. So I've got my sifter, I've got another bowl. I'm gonna add my 1 3/4 cups of flour. And again, I want to level this off, so I'm going to take a big heaping scoop, and then I'm just going to level it. So there's my 1 cup. And rather than trying to guesstimate what 3/4 of a cup would be, I'm just going to take my half and my quarter and measure it so that it's accurate. So here's my half, and then my quarter. New York accent from Connecticut. All right, so I've got my flour. I'm also going to measure out my leavening agents, which is 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder. And I'm going to put that in with my flour. That's 1 1/2 of baking powder. And then I need a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. Again, big heaping scoop. Level it off. Measure that out. You guys can see in that camera. Baking soda. Put my lids back on. And then I have a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I'm showing this because the salt, if it's kosher, is not going to go through the sifter. So I'll show you how this works. All right. So from here I'm going to sift, and you can either shake it or you can take a spoon, bang it, whatever you want to do. I'm not a big fan of this. I think it makes a big mess, but it goes through all the same. And what we're trying to do is we're just trying to soften up the flour, and you'll notice there'll be lumps in the flour that we want to break up and just pass it through the sifter. If you don't, they could create air pockets that you'll have in your final product. All right, so now you see the salt did not go through, everything else did. Just flip it over and put your salt in. And if you want to continue to mix it, you just kind of mix it with a fork. Make sure everything's incorporated. All right, so I've got my dry ingredients. I also need a 1/4 cup of sugar for this recipe. I'm going to put this in a separate bowl. And I need a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and this is what we're going to roll the cookies in when we start to portion them. Just use my finger, put that in there.
It really goes again.
And then, I know, I just want them out of the way. And then I'm just going to stir this up. So I've got a nice cinnamon sugar. I don't know about you guys, but in the morning, on a piece of toast, cinnamon sugar and butter, oh, it's so good. All right, so this is part of my mise en place. That's all set. All right, I've got my corn syrup. I also have my egg, and then we're gonna go back to my creamed butter and sugar, which is blended. So this is gonna call for, I do need those again. These are my measuring spoons. I need a teaspoon of corn syrup, and you can use maple syrup, like real maple syrup as an alternative if you're not a fan of the corn syrup. I know a lot of folks don't use it. I also need a teaspoon of vanilla. And when I measure this, I want to measure it over a container that is not my recipe, because if I overmeasure, it won't go in the recipe, it'll go into the container I'm putting it over. And then I need 1 egg. And same thing, I'm going to crack my egg separately so that I don't get shells in the batter. That's going to go into, so these are considered my wet ingredients now. My egg, my corn syrup, and my vanilla. And now I'm just going to blend these using the wooden spoon. And be patient. It's going to start off a little bit slimy, but eventually it'll blend in. And then once it starts to blend in, you can pick up your speed until it's fully incorporated. All right. And now from this point, I'm going to add all of my flour at once. Some people say do it in half a batch. I do it all at once so I don't overmix it. If you remember back to the video, we talked about overworking flour and overproducing the gluten, which makes a tougher cookie. So I don't want to do that. And again, I'm going to use my wooden spoon to get this blended together. And be patient, it's going to take some time. At this point, most kids are in the panic mode, like, this isn't mixing, it's too flaky. You just got to be patient. It'll eventually bind together. You can clean off your spoon with a rubber spatula if you have it, or just another spoon, or you're at home, use your fingers, that's fine. And then from here, I'm just going to start blending it by hand. I'm just going to press it into a ball. And I want to get rid of all the cracks and crevices of the flour, make sure it's really blended in. And I'm pressing and folding with the palm of my hand until it's incorporated. Now there's 2 ways you can portion these, all right? So I've got my sheet tray. I have portion scoops, but I also have 2 spoons. One of the things you want to kind of keep in mind is you want to finish one job before you start the next. So we want to make rolled cookies into our cinnamon sugar. All right? So I've got my work area that's nice and neat. All right? If I'm going to do my portion scoops, I'm going to portion them all off. So I'm going to level them off, get them portioned first, and then I'm going to go back and roll them. And you see how fast this is? Rather than putting the portion scoop down and starting to roll and shape, I'm just getting them all portioned first. Then when I'm done with my batter, I'm going to go and I'm going to roll them nice and smooth. They're going to go into my cinnamon sugar. And then I'm going to place them on my sheet tray. And when you place them on a sheet tray, you want to go with your rows first, then your column, and then you fill in the rest of the tray so that you have an even again, do one job before you start the next. So portion, roll, coat, and then tray. Then I'm going to go down, so I'll have 3 across, 4 down. I can tell that they're evenly spread out and distributed on the tray. And then I would continue to make the rest of them on this tray here. I'm going to need 2 trays for this, for the batter that I have, because it makes, like I said, 18 to 24. And then you're going to bake them for 20 minutes. And when they're finished, they're going to look like these awesome puppies right here.